to this lecture on IAM groups. An IAM group is a collection of users. All users in the group inherit the permissions assigned to the group. However, before we talk about groups, we need to talk about users. What is an IAM user? An IAM user represents a person or service that interacts with AWS. You define the user within your AWS account, and any activity done by that user is billed to your account. Once you create a user, that user can sign in to gain access to the AWS resource inside your account. You can also add more users to your account as needed, and each person should have their own login credentials. Providing users with their own login credentials prevents sharing of credentials. When you create an IAM user, you have the option to grant permissions directly at the user level. Now, this can seem like a good idea if you have only one or few users. However, as the number of users increases, it becomes more complicated to keep up with permissions. For example, if you have 3,000 users in your account, administering access becomes challenging, and it's impossible to get a top-level view of who can perform what actions on which resources. If only there were another way to group IAM users and attach permissions at the group level instead. Guess what? There is, and also guess what? It's called IAM groups. So what's an IAM group? Well, an IAM group is a collection of users, and all the users in the group inherit the permissions assigned to the group. This makes it easy to give permissions to multiple users at once, and it's a more convenient and scalable way of managing permissions for users in your account. And that's why IAM groups is one of the best practices that we went through on a previous slide. You might want IAM groups organized by developers, security, and admins. You would then place all of your IAM users in the respective group for their job function. This provides a better view to see who has what permissions within your organization and an easier way to scale as new people join, leave, and change roles in your organization. For example, let's say a new developer joins your AWS account to help with some of your applications. You simply create a new user, let's call her Vanessa, and add them to the developer group without having to think about permissions that they need, as it's already tied to the group. Another example, if a developer changes jobs and becomes a security engineer, instead of editing the user's permissions directly, you can instead remove them from the old group and add them to the new group that already has the correct level of access. So in this example, Susan decides she wants to move into security. Well, all we do is take her out of this group and put her in the security group. So that's a brief introduction to groups. We're now going to dig a bit deeper, but first I just want to go through some of the benefits of using groups. Firstly, efficient management. You manage access at the group level, making it easier to add or remove users without reassigning individual permissions. There's also the principle of least privilege, and with this method, it helps adhere to security best practices by ensuring users only receive the necessary permissions for their tasks. is also the benefit of dynamic access. When you add a user to a group, they dynamically gain access to the accounts and applications assigned to that group. Conversely, they lose access when removed. Okay, so in our next lecture, we're going to explore assigning permissions via groups, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one.